Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Community Manager for SAGE Methodspace, and I'm happy to be joined here today with Francis Dane. So we're going to talk a little bit about evaluating research. But before we get to that, if you are new to Methodspace, this is a blog community sponsored by SAGE Publishing, and we're interested in all things to do with designing, planning, conducting, analyzing research, writing about it, sharing results in all kinds of ways, hopefully to create some kind of impact. And you can see at the heart of this Venn diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we think that whether you are a student or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. So I want to just start out by asking you, what do you mean by evaluating research? How do you define that?
Well, thanks very much, Janet, for including me in this. This is something that, of course, I just love doing. So anytime I just keep going on and on and on about research, feel free to interrupt and say, wait a minute, I asked you a question and you haven't gotten there yet. But evaluating research has been the title of the book for a number of years, because to me, being able to understand and critique and find both the positives and the negatives of a particular research project is perhaps the most important thing about research, being able to see where the advantages and the disadvantages, the limitations as well as the strengths of a particular project, either as you're reading someone else's research or as you're planning your own research, is to me the most important part about research. So evaluating research, being able to look at it and see both the pros and the cons is an important part of it. And so that was the impetus for starting the book series in the first place, trying to help people understand how it is that they can look at a research project or a series, if it's a series in an article, and be able to figure out how it is that where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, and in the case of people who are reading others' research, then begin to apply it to their own interests.
Right. And so, it's kind of, I think we all need a decoder ring, to be able to understand there's so many different kinds of research. And since research methods and methodologies is my area of interest in our central focus on Methodspace, I know that, the approaches people are using, are constantly expanding and changing. And so, I think about in terms of, evaluation with this, the original version of the Bloom's taxonomy, evaluation is at the top of the pyramid. And, even though it's not necessarily a completely linear model, still, to get to the point where we can evaluate, we need to have, the basic knowledge about the methods or methodologies. I've kind of laid out here about, knowing kind of what are the schools of thought, what are the, who are the thinkers, what is the, how do they use terminology, what are the basic concepts, and then, to be able to use that to not only apply to your own research design, if that's what you're doing, but also to be able to analyze and synthesize with other things that to evaluate. And part of the reason I think this is so important right now is that we need to branch out beyond say the disciplines and methods that we're familiar with. And so I wondered how you think about this and the kind of the place that evaluation plays within kind of the whole model of thinking.
Well, I think you're right that that evaluation is well, let me say good evaluation or proper evaluation or responsive evaluation involves all of those things, because you can't responsibly evaluate something without having a good deal of knowledge about it, and being able to obviously comprehend it, and being able to apply it, and synthesize the aspects of it. Unfortunately, we're learning these days that anybody can evaluate any damn thing.
Right,
and
right.
And so part of being able to I refer to the process of consuming research, and being a good research consumer means being able to evaluate it and decide whether or not the research applies to your particular interests, and whether those interests are in producing more research, or in applying it in a particular context, or in putting it into practice, is going to involve evaluating it to the point of at least determining whether or not it's applicable.
Right.
And
Or,
then,
or whether the research was done in a thorough and rigorous way. I mean, certainly,
oh, absolutely,
you know, we
yeah,
have,
yeah.
you know, on the most formal end of the spectrum, peer review, where, you know, where, you know, once you kind of, you know, have your PhD and are out in the field, inevitably, you know, you'll be asked to provide some review of others' research that is going to make a difference for that scholar's life, you know, whether the work gets published or not. And then when we teach, we're evaluating our students' research and our students' work, and even as students, is often a, you know, kind of a you know, opportunity to review our fellow students' work and critique them. So, you know, I think, you know, they're certainly, you know, valuable skills to have.
And we also evaluate our colleagues' work in those hallway conversations, or the more formal conversations, when somebody brings something to you and says, hey, here's an idea, and what do you think of it?
Right.
There's also those evaluation skills there. So being able to evaluate is important in all kinds of contexts, and it's not easy, as anybody who's tried to do it understands. Right. I think back to the first time I was asked to evaluate a manuscript to be a peer reviewer, and I thought, oh, this is easy. I've read articles. I've decided whether or not I can use it, but then when I was asked to put it on paper, and others were going to rely on it, you know, I kind of scared me a lot.
Yeah, it's something to take seriously, because you know, you have a role in determining the value of, I mean, evaluate it's like you're determining the value. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you as we're kicking off this year with Methodspace, of thinking about research relevance in a broad sense, you know, to me, part of that, you know, is ties in with the trend towards more interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary work, and even the kind of shifting of methods and methodologies. We think about things like, say, ethnography, that used to be kind of something that anthropologists do. Well, now business researchers do it. So, you know, there's a lot of kind of cross-fertilization, which of course, you know, in a place like Methodspace, we hope will happen. But, you know, in order to do that, you have to be able to understand research that's different from what you might be familiar with. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, how your book might be helpful to someone who is trying to branch out and look at a bigger collection of literature, or trying to understand maybe new approaches that they might want to take to their studies.
Well, I think it could be helpful in that we cover a wide variety of methodologies. It's not just experimental design. We do, in fact, cover ethnography, and we also cover measurement and sampling, and even to the point of covering how to access research and looking at the various sources, and for those who are just starting out, how to get beyond paywalls and things like that. So survey research, qualitative research, it's a book about the different ways of doing research and the beginnings of the methodology. So if someone has never been exposed to ethnographic research, then the chapter that includes ethnographic research, which would be the qualitative chapter, would be a good introduction to it. It's not going to enable people to get out there and do ethnographic research, but it should enable them to be able to read and read ethnographic research to the point of being able to evaluate it. And that's what we want to do with the book, is bring people to the point of being able to evaluate the research so that they can decide whether or not it is appropriate for them to use it in whatever their use of the research is.
Yeah, I think, I look at my shelves where, I still have, a library of books that are in print in addition to all the electronic resources. And, so often with, research methods and methodologies that are, quite complex, you can find yourself just getting lost in, the number of different resources that are available. So to have something that provides this kind of an overview, and, as I was showing with the Bloom's taxonomy, the kind of, what are the basics about each type, so that you can start to understand, what do I need to know in order to get what I'm trying to learn, from this particular piece of research. And then, if you decide, this sounds interesting, this is what I want to do, well, then you can go off and get the resources that are specialized to that particular approach.
Oh yeah, and I want to be clear up front that this will bring people at the introductory level to the important methodological points within each of these research areas. So I like your point about if they're interested in a particular kind of research, there are also sources as to where to learn more, as well as lots of examples of the kinds of research that's done, to give them examples of research to look at, to see how it was done, and of course the references, so they can go look it up themselves. But it's very, very much a primer in terms of these different methodologies, and not something that's going to prepare them to do the research themselves.
Right. So I guess, while I would see the value of using this as a text in kind of an intro, fundamentals kind of course in an academic setting, it also seems to me to be a useful book for someone who, again, is trying to look at, perhaps they're approaching, they want to do a mixed method study, and, they've only done qualitative or quantitative before, and now they've got to think about, what another methods might be, or to someone who is, trying to just look beyond, what's been familiar to them. I mean, I know, when I was a professor, I mean, you were looking at the journals and the kind of research traditions within your own field of study. But if you want to go beyond that, to get a broader understanding, then, it seemed like this would be a useful kind of, book, more kind of as a professional reading.
Yeah, I would hope it would be useful to professionals for research methods outside of their areas, and as a guide to the kinds of sources to go to, and once they've understood the basics, they can get the basics from this book, and then follow up on the sources that are provided within the book to to go further in if they're interested, or if they're planning to actually use and incorporate that methodology into their own research, if they're going to be involved in mixed methods, or if they're collaborating and want to know more about what their collaborators are doing on a project.
So since this is the third edition, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's new in this edition?
Well, there's considerable expansion of a number of the chapters, especially the qualitative chapter. There's been some rearrangement of the material. Everything is updated. All of the exemplar studies have been updated, and a number of additional examples have been included. The range of research included has been broadened to include business research and healthcare research, and I think we've got some, I know we've got some sociological research, so the social sciences have been expanded considerably. I think there's even some chemistry research that's been included.
Okay.
The pedagogical aspects have been updated. There's in addition to the glossary that's always been in there, we've added marginal definitions so that people don't have to go to the glossary if they've they're a few pages further into the chapter and they need a reminder of the definition of the word. They can just pull back a couple pages, flip back a couple pages, and there's a reminder definition in the margin. We've got additional questions, review questions, as well as understanding checks along the way. So there's open-ended questions that individuals can answer along the way. Compare reliability with validity. What are the differences between those two concepts, for example? So that readers can check on their understanding at a particular point in the chapter before going on to make sure that they've understood the basics before adding on to that material.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I'm really proud of this third edition. We've put in suggestions that have come out of the second edition that we've obtained, and as we've had in other editions, or as I have in other editions, this is the first time I've brought on a co-author, and it's been a thrill to work with Elliot Carhart. It's too bad he couldn't join us today, but our contact information remains in the book, so we're always open to suggestions and evaluative comments for improvement in future editions. So the evaluations that we received that I received on the first couple of editions have improved this edition. So we're hoping
So
for
your readers
comments.
walk the talk.
We hope so. Yeah. Well, they have so far, and so we hope they continue to do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with us about kind of the ideas in the broadest sense, as well as how this particular book kind of will help researchers.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Janet. It's been a great conversation. So.